Karen thought she could intimidate my wife off our own land until she learned the hard way that the woman she was messing with runs the FBI, and by then, it was already too late. Karen strutted onto the property like she owned the land beneath her feet, with an oversized clipboard in one hand and a smug expression etched across her face. She made her way down the gravel path that led toward the house. The sun beat down, but it didn't seem to dull her energy. If anything, she looked charged by the imagined authority she thought she carried. Her first words were sharp, practiced, and laced with entitlement. "You can't be here. This area is under HOA regulation now, and this residence is not registered under your name." The woman she was addressing simply looked up, brows slightly raised, unbothered by the disruption. "This is my land," came the cool response, steady and confident, as if the weight of Karen's faux authority never landed. Karen scoffed loudly, flipping through her clipboard as if it contained sacred law. "Actually," she began, with exaggerated emphasis, "the new bylaws were passed last week, and this entire section has been absorbed under our community oversight. Should have received the update." She waved a wrinkled sheet of printer paper. In the air, like it was a final judgment, the woman walked over, took the paper from Karen's hand, and examined it for a few seconds. There was no official letterhead, no signatures, no legal stamp, nothing but vague language and improperly formatted declarations. "This isn't legal. This isn't even real policy," she said flatly. Karen's mouth tightened. "Expect you to understand how HOAs work. They're designed to protect property values and create uniformity. People like you disrupt that." "People like me?" the woman asked, calmly but sharply. "You're not on the community registry. You're not even listed on the local homeowner database. You don't attend the monthly board meetings. You haven't paid a single cent in dues, and no one even knew you were living here until last week. Squatting on property without official approval is a serious violation." "I don't need approval to live on my own land," she replied. Karen narrowed her eyes, stepping forward as if to assert dominance. "You don't get to define the rules. The community does. And I'm the board president. This ranch falls within our expanded boundaries now. You'll need to vacate the property until your status is reviewed by the compliance committee." Woman laughed quietly, a sound that visibly irritated Karen. "Your so-called boundaries mean nothing here. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. It's not under HOA control, nor will it ever be. You have no jurisdiction here." Karen's frustration turned to anger. "This isn't over. I'll file a report. You're in direct violation of HOA Section 4C, unauthorized occupation of a residential property by a non-verified individual. You'll be fined $1,500 for each day you remain non-compliant." "You're bluffing," the woman replied. "There's no such clause, and even if there were, it wouldn't apply here. Your HOA doesn't have the authority to make unilateral annexations." Karen didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, began taking photos of the front door, the house number, the woman's face. "I'll be submitting this to our legal team.
Oh.
Don't bother trying to delete your online presence. It's already been screenshotted." The woman didn't flinch. "Feel free to share that with whoever you want. You'll be making this a lot easier." "For me," Karen froze for a second, confused. "Excuse me?" The woman said nothing more. She simply turned and resumed what she had been doing before being interrupted. Her body language completely dismissing Karen's presence. The lack of fear, the absence of defensiveness, it unsettled Karen more than any threat ever could. Karen held her phone tightly, knuckles pale, as she fired off a rapid series of messages. "This is exactly why HOAs exist. To stop lawlessness from spreading," she muttered under her breath. She typed up a quick complaint and tagged several other board members. "Suspected trespasser on property? No residency verification. Possibly. Dangerous. Will be following up with authorities." The woman remained calm, her expression unreadable, but her mind already moving 3 steps ahead. There would be more attempts, more paperwork, more lies. Karen wasn't going away easily, but neither was she. There was a reason she hadn't revealed who she was. Let Karen play her games, push her threats, gather her fake evidence. let her escalate things just enough. Because when the time came to act, it would be with full legal authority, and Karen would find herself entangled in something much bigger than she could ever understand. But for now, Karen walked away, convinced she was in control. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who wrote the rules Karen pretended to enforce. Karen didn't wait long. Less than 24 hours later, she returned. But this time, she didn't come alone. 2 HOA board members followed behind her like backup dancers to a self-appointed queen, both wearing lanyards with printed badges that looked like they were made at home. Trailing close behind was a man in a cheap security uniform, arms crossed, sunglasses on, trying to look important. The group blocked the driveway like they were staging an intervention. Karen stood front and center, chin raised, clipboard clutched, like a weapon. "We're here to enforce the board's decision," she announced loudly. "After reviewing the situation, the HOA has determined that this property is not in compliance with our residency requirements." One of the board members nodded stiffly. The other unfolded a laminated sheet of paper and held it up like a sacred text. The so-called policy they referred to was nothing more than a recycled document filled with vague language, fake codes, and self-made statutes. Karen continued, undeterred by the silence. "You were given verbal notice yesterday. This visit is formal. You must vacate the premises immediately or face financial penalties and potential legal escalation. Per Community Regulation 6B, single occupancy of ranch properties by non-listed residents violates neighborhood safety codes." Woman remained composed. "Let me make this clear again. This property is not under HOA governance. You have no authority here. You are trespassing." Karen scoffed. "It's amazing how people like you think rules don't apply to them. This community was created to maintain order, not allow squatters to take over prime land. And your attitude is exactly why we exist." "You don't exist outside your charter," the woman replied. "This land was never submitted to your jurisdiction. You're expanding illegally, and these stunts only prove how far you're willing to go to intimidate residents." One of the men stepped forward. "We're authorized to issue a citation. We'll begin the first round of fines today." Handed over a printed sheet, marked in bold with a fake citation number and a penalty fee of $3,000. At the bottom, stated in red, "Non-payment will result in legal escalation and eviction procedures." The woman looked at the paper, then looked up slowly. "You can send this to whatever mailbox you want. It won't stand in court. If you step 1 foot further on this property, I'll have all 3 of you removed for trespassing." The security guard finally spoke, his voice dry and flat. "Ma'am, you're being non-compliant. We've been told you're not listed as the legal resident here. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll be forced to notify the sheriff's department." "Go ahead," she replied, eyes sharp and unwavering. "Okay? And when you do, be sure to let them know exactly who you're calling them on." Karen rolled her eyes. "You really think your smug attitude and fancy words will change anything? Been on this board for 6 years. I've written the majority of our policies. We've cleaned up neighborhoods, removed problematic tenants, and prevented all kinds of threats to this community. Don't think you're untouchable just because. You talk like a lawyer." "I don't talk like a lawyer," she replied. I talk like someone who actually understands the law. There's a difference." Karen's frustration boiled over. "You're hiding behind technicalities. You're not listed as a permanent resident. No local ID, no community participation. You're a stranger trying to claim ownership. Not going to work. People like me don't back down." The woman tilted her head, voice calm and low. "That's exactly why this ends badly for you." Karen stepped closer, trying to stare her down, but the effect was lost. The woman stood, her ground unmoved by the empty display of power. Karen took out her phone, pressed record, and began narrating loudly. "This is documentation of a non-compliant resident refusing to vacate HOA-controlled land. We are currently being obstructed and harassed during lawful enforcement." Woman didn't even blink. "Perfect. Make sure you record everything. You're going to need it when this hits the federal level." One of the board members faltered slightly, looking uncertain. Karen shot him a glare and muttered, "Stay firm." But the woman noticed the crack. She knew fear when she saw it tanned. She also knew when someone had just realized they might be in way over their head. Karen finished the video and smiled smugly. "We have what we need. You'll be hearing from our legal team." The woman gave a slow nod. "Good. I've already assembled mine." Karen raised a brow. "What? Are you going to hire some small-town attorney to handle this?" Came the reply. "I have access to the Department of Justice. That's a little bigger than your HOA counsel." Karen paused for half a second, then waved dismissively. "You're bluffing." The woman simply turned and walked away, leaving Karen and her fake entourage standing at the edge of a property they never had control over to begin with. But they didn't realize that yet. They still thought they were winning. They had no idea they'd already lost. Karen paced around her kitchen the following morning, phone in hand. Jaw clenched so tightly she barely noticed the coffee she spilled down the front of her robe. Her HOA group chat was flooded with supportive emojis and firestorm encouragement from a few loyal board members who still believed in her crusade. She kept replaying the video from the day before, convinced that her case was airtight. God, but something about the woman's calm demeanor had unsettled her. That warning about the Department of Justice was still ringing in her ears. She couldn't risk letting the situation spiral further. The HOA's authority was already being questioned by other residents who had heard whispers about a legal boundary overreach. If she didn't act fast, her grip on the neighborhood would slip hand. Nothing threatened Karen more than losing control, so she dialed 911 with theatrical urgency. She reported a suspicious woman occupying property outside community protocols and added a vague but heavy implication. The woman might be dangerous and posing a threat to the peace and security of the neighborhood. She made sure to emphasize her position on the HOA board and mentioned prior confrontations, as if she had narrowly escaped danger. The dispatcher listened, took notes, and dispatched local officers. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up to the ranch. Karen followed in her SUV, parking right at the edge of the driveway. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest, eyes locked on the front door. The moment the officers stepped out, she walked up confidently and waved them over. "There she is," Karen said, pointing toward the porch. "She's been here for several days without proof of ownership, refuses to comply with HOA policies, and has verbally threatened board members. We suspect she might be squatting or impersonating a resident." The officers looked at each other, then nodded and approached the house. The woman greeted them calmly, with no signs of alarm. She handed over her identification, immediately federal issue, unmistakable in its seriousness. One of the officers went quiet as his eyes scanned the badge. His partner leaned over and his expression shifted from procedural to stunned. Karen stood behind them, arms still folded, waiting for them to escort the woman away. Instead, one of the officers turned slowly and walked toward Karen. "Ma'am, you said this individual didn't identify herself properly?" Karen lifted her chin. "She didn't. She refused to leave. I told you, she threatened legal action. She's impersonating someone important." "She's not impersonating anyone," the officer cut in, his voice more careful now. "She's director of counterintelligence. She's with the FBI." Karen's face drained of color. No, that can't be right. You must be confused. That badge could be fake. Anyone can order one online." The officer gave her a long look. "It's not fake. Right. I just confirmed it through dispatch." Karen stumbled over her words, backpedaling. Furiously, I didn't know. She didn't say that yesterday. She didn't show any ID. I was just trying to follow protocol. There was no reason for her to hide her identity." "She didn't hide anything," the officer said. "Never asked." The woman stepped forward now, her expression unreadable but powerful. "You wanted to make a point, Karen. You wanted to win a fight you created out of boredom, entitlement, or maybe just ego. I gave you every chance to walk away. You doubled down." Karen's voice cracked slightly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought someone had moved in illegally. You have procedures. This isn't your jurisdiction." The woman replied, "You have no authority on this land. Your fake citations, your phony fines, your threats, none of it holds legal weight. But filing a false report with emergency services, that does." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The woman turned to the officers. "Press charge as yet." But I do expect this incident to be documented. One officer nodded solemnly. Absolutely. We'll file a full report. Karen stood there motionless as they walked away. Her plan had collapsed under its own weight. Her ego had led her straight into disaster. The woman she tried to evict was more than a resident. She was one of the most powerful women in federal law enforcement, and now she had Karen's name, voice, and false report on record. Karen tried to recover, saying quietly, I didn't know who she was. The woman paused before getting inside. You never cared who I was. You just assumed I didn't belong. The words hit harder than any lawsuit could. And for the first time in her 6-year reign of the HOA, Karen had no rebuttal. She had called the cops on the FBI, and now the real consequences were about to begin. The fallout began quietly at first. A formal letter arrived at HOA headquarters 2 days later, stamped with the Department of Justice seal. It was brief, clinical, and terrifying. It referenced a federal inquiry into overreach by a private homeowners association, citing several specific incidents, including the unauthorized attempt to annex known HOA property, false citation issuance, and misuse of emergency services. The letter was signed by the very woman Karen had tried to evict. The HOA board meeting that week was a disaster. Half the members didn't show. The ones who did sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact, whispering among themselves. Karen entered late, visibly shaken, holding a folder stuffed with outdated policies and legal printouts. She tried to open with her usual confident tone, but her voice cracked halfway through the agenda. We are under an organized attack, she declared, slamming the folder on the table. Oh, she's using her position to punish us for enforcing our community standards. One board member, Mitchell, cleared his throat. Karen, she didn't start this. You did. She owns that land. It was never part of our community charter. Borders our district. That gives us influence. No, it doesn't, he replied flatly. We don't have authority to expand. The HOA, unless every affected property owner consents. She never did. Karen slammed her palm down. She was hostile from the start. She refused to engage, refused to acknowledge our rules, refused to cooperate. She's the FBI director, another board member said slowly. Did you really think threatening her with a fake citation and calling 911 would end well? Karen stood, face red. We needed to make a point. We have to protect the identity of this neighborhood. Can't let people like her. People like her, Mitchell asked coldly. Or people you assumed weren't worthy of living here. Silence in the room said everything. Word spread fast. The federal inquiry triggered a deeper investigation, not just into Karen's actions, but into the HOA's entire leadership structure. Past fines were reviewed. Dozens of citations mysteriously vanished from the ledger. Several residents came forward with complaints they had never submitted before, afraid of retaliation. Karen had ruled with fear, but that fear was cracking. People were no longer intimidated, they were angry. Multiple residents filed civil suits, citing harassment, unlawful enforcement, and abuse of position. Several board members resigned overnight. One anonymous whistleblower released emails showing Karen had instructed others to apply pressure on properties she labeled as unfitting. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of it all remained silent but not inactive. A legal team representing the Department of Justice began combing through the HOA's public records, city filings, and boundary claims. Every inch of Karen's paperwork was dissected and compared against federal and county land maps. What emerged was a pattern. Karen had been aggressively pushing to absorb properties just outside the HOA lines for years, often targeting landowners who lived quietly, didn't attend meetings, or didn't look like they belonged. Her actions weren't just unethical, they bordered on criminal. Karen tried to save face. She posted on community forums, claiming she was being persecuted by a government operative. She uploaded clipped videos of the confrontation, editing outer threats and exaggerating her victimhood, but it backfired. In the age of digital receipts, the original footage surfaced, exposing every lie. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do federal attorneys. In a final act of desperation, Karen submitted a request to temporarily dissolve the HOA board, hoping to reset leadership rebrand, and dodge liability. The county rejected her. Petition within 48 hours. Meanwhile, quiet update appeared on the Department of Justice's website. A new initiative targeting local corruption and abuse of power in residential associations. It didn't mention Karen by name, but the timing was no coincidence. In private, Karen was unraveling. Her allies were gone. Her inbox was full of legal notices. She stopped answering her door. Even her most loyal supporters were turning silent. She wasn't just losing control of the HOA, she was losing her name, her reputation, her life as she knew it, and the woman she tried to harass. She never needed to shout. She didn't retaliate with threats or social media drama. She let the law work. She let the truth surface. And when the tables turned, she didn't gloat. She simply watched the system. Karen thought she could manipulate, crush her under its full weight, because when you threaten a woman who understands every crack in your armor, you don't get a second chance, you get audited. The for sale sign appeared on Karen's lawn just after sunrise. No grand announcement, no farewell letter to the community, no dramatic speech at the final HOA meeting, just a weather-worn sign planted crookedly in the soil, as if even it didn't want to be there. Neighbors noticed immediately. Some whispered, others simply nodded. No one was surprised. The lawsuits had piled up faster than Karen could open them. HOA members she once controlled were now testifying against her in legal filings. Depositions revealed years of abuse, fabricated citations, and retaliatory actions against residents who questioned her authority. Her lawyer stopped answering calls. Her bank accounts were frozen pending judgment. One court had already ruled in favor of a local family. She'd fined $10,000 for failing to paint their mailbox white. The family won triple damages. More rulings were expected soon. Karen had once described the neighborhood as her kingdom. She used to walk through it like she owned the air. Now she parked 3 blocks away from her own house to avoid confrontations. Residents had stopped waving. Some closed their doors when they saw her. Others didn't even acknowledge her presence. She tried to control the narrative, at first posting defensive updates, claiming she had been targeted for upholding standards. But every post brought more backlash. Former supporters exposed private group chats where she bragged about using fines as tools of obedience. A leaked voice memo revealed her threatening to force out the weak links who didn't fit. The HOA vision, her voice once seen as authoritative, now sounded desperate, cornered. Small that the woman at the center of her downfall never responded publicly. She didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for her. Karen's attempts to twist the story into a power struggle failed under the weight of her own actions. She had harassed a federal official on her own land, falsified legal documents, and lied to law enforcement. The consequences were no longer avoidable. They were inevitable. When federal investigators concluded their review, they forwarded findings to state prosecutors and civil rights offices. Multiple violations were confirmed, including unlawful discrimination, abuse of emergency services, and attempts to seize non-HOA land without consent. A federal fine was recommended. So was a formal ban from serving on any HOA or municipal board. Again, Karen didn't even try to fight it. Her name had become a punchline in local politics. On moving day, her driveway was quiet but not empty. A few neighbors stood at a distance watching her carry boxes alone. No one offered to help. One offered to say goodbye. The same people who once cheered her enforcement now looked through her like she didn't exist. As Karen closed the back of her SUV, the woman stepped out onto her porch, calm, silent, watching, not with hatred, just with clarity. Karen paused, clutching her keys like a lifeline, and forced a tight smile. But there was no acknowledgement from across the property, no words exchanged, only silence. The same silence Karen had refused to listen to months earlier, when she thought power came from noise and control. Now she understood. True power didn't announce itself, it simply endured. She got in her car and drove away. Behind her, communities slowly began to recover. Residents repealed Karen's faux regulations, restored freedom to homeowners, and redefined what neighborhood meant without fear. The HOA board was rebuilt from scratch under independent oversight. Ranch remained untouched, proudly outside the lines of the association's reach. It stood as a reminder of boundaries of truth, of how quickly paper power crumbles when challenged by real authority. The woman returned to her garden the following day. She didn't speak about Karen, didn't need to mention her name. Trimmed her hedges, pulled weeds, and planted new seeds in the same soil that Karen once tried to control. No patrols, no clipboards, no warnings taped to fences, just passand the knowledge that justice, no matter how long it takes, always arrives right on time. And somewhere far from the land she tried to dominate, Karen sat in a house that didn't belong to her, in a town where no one knew her name. But she would always remember the moment she tried to evict a woman from her own ranch without realizing she'd picked a fight with the FBI director, a fight she was never, ever going to win.